We are, as I've told you, a historically violent nation. We know this. And instead of trying to mitigate for this history, we choose to arm our citizenry to the teeth.
We are the Armed Attorneys. Today, we're talking about the latest move from the federal government when it comes to restricting our right to keep and bear arms. And this comes in the form of universal background checks. Now, this particular act, we're gonna talk through the points here. It is a little nuanced in that I'm afraid that maybe it actually has a chance, and I don't want it to pass. So let's get prepared. Let's talk about it. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And what are we talking about?
We're talking about great friend to guns, Senator Chris Murphy. I'm just kidding. Has introduced Senate Bill 494, which is a Universal Background Check Expansion Act, is what it's called. Yes, what is scary about this is that unfortunately we have seen recently that we have lawmakers on Capitol Hill who are willing to bargain away our gun rights. Now, luckily, we have a different composition of the House now than we did, let's say, when the Bipartisan Safer Community Act was bargained away.
Right.
However, you can't trust the Senate on guns.
No.
Unfortunately.
Look at you, John Cornyn.
Mm-hmm. But, we have a different composition of the House, so let's hope that this is just us being very paranoid. But it makes me paranoid because universal background checks are probably the biggest threat, I think, to our gun rights right now because it sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
It sounds reasonable until you really figure out what that means.
Yeah, so we have Senate Bill 494. This is in the Senate. And I think there's a House companion, HR 715. So, essentially what this would do is it would funnel all firearms transactions with an exception. We'll go through the exceptions. It would require they go through a federal firearms license dealer, an FFL. Now, why that's so nefarious and why that's such a bad idea in the first place is kind of this three-step, what we call gun registry. We funnel all transactions through the FFLs. The FFLs are having to record these transactions with 4473s that have to be maintained forever. The federal government is running these places out of business, and they have to turn their records over to the federal government. Therefore, we get our gun registry.
I think it's worse than that.
Yeah.
Like that optimistically, yes, if every firearm purchase goes through an FFL dealer for a background check, yes. Do you have a gun registry? Absolutely. What scares me is if every firearm purchase goes through the government, what does the government have the power to do, Richard?
Well, they have the power to deny.
Shut it down.
Yeah,
right?
shut down the background check system. And we've seen it happen before.
Exactly. If you were trying to buy a gun during summer of 2020 with COVID and the riots, unless you could bypass said background check with your FFL dealer because you had a qualifying handgun license, you didn't get your gun because the FBI was just like, oops, sorry, no Second Amendment rights for you because we're overwhelmed.
Well, and I think, a creative solution to this. We'll talk about it at the end. But before we get there, the federal government is they are the main perpetrator of this. They screw something up. They're like, ooh, if we just had a little bit more money, it wouldn't be screwed up.
Money, please.
More money goes into it. The problem gets worse. Well, you didn't give us enough.
I don't
And they just
money though.
They just keep going in this cycle. And so with the Fix Nix Act, with some money that got poured into it, with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, we see the database getting screwed up. Just leave civil unrest and, pandemic aside, just in regular normal times.
Here's what scares me about you, other than the things we've already said, like shutting down gun purchases and registries. But what scares me about universal background checks is how appealing they can make it sound, right? Because if you poll Americans and you say, do you think universal background checks are a good idea? Something like between 70 and 80% generally, I think. You can check me on those numbers, tell me I'm wrong, but that's just my flash in the pan here memory of people say, yes, great idea. Why? Because they think it means the kind of background check system we already have. Because, generally speaking, are you cool with an FFL dealer conducting a background check? Most people say, yeah, good system, right? We should check, that's fine. But if you actually present it as, do you think there should be a background check for every single firearm purchase and there should be essentially no such thing as a private sale anymore without getting the government involved? it's not that gigantic chunk of people who are in favor. And yet the polls are so deceptive. The lawmakers are like, okay, people like this. Maybe it is the thing I can compromise your gun rights on.
Yeah, I mean, if you were truthful and said, are you in favor of background checks used to build a gun registry? I don't think people would support that.
No.
No.
But it's polls are what the right lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? Polls are what they are.
So there are carve-outs, and this is why this one is probably a little bit more dangerous than some of the other anti-2A legislation we see pending. And we got to talk about that. But there are carve-outs here for law enforcement, for transfers between direct relatives, temporary loans during hunting, or let's say you're at the range. Am I missing any other big ones? Estate administrators, if they're collecting the firearms as part of somebody passing.
Right. Those are the biggies,
Yeah.
right? Which sounds like kind of reasonable, right? Temporary transfers if someone's in danger, or your immediate family, you can loan something out at the range. Ultimately, again, we are in a place of this might look appealing if you're not digging into it, but that's what makes it so incredibly dangerous.
And again, this is the kind of stuff that makes it dangerous because, I mean, we see a national election coming up, a presidential election. Usually what that causes as a residual effect, I mean, we see places that are Republican plus 10. They might go down to Republican plus 4. So these races become much more tight. We see places become more purple in presidential elections. And so that makes it pretty stinking dangerous. Now, the text isn't even available yet up on the congress.gov. This is a very, very new bill, but it's something that we need to talk to our people about, talk to your representatives about. This is something that can't be supported. Now, unorthodox fix, and maybe you disagree with me.
Okay, I don't even know where you're going here.
All right, so
Let's see.
every eligible person should have a firearm. A gun registry makes absolutely no point at that point if everybody has a gun.
Just issue guns to everyone.
Yeah. No, but I think, truly, if we have 300 million eligible people in the United States, it's probably not that high. It's probably like 200 million eligible people in the United States. If all 200 people had a firearm, does a gun registry matter at that point?
No. Although, I don't know. Does the government want to know who's more dangerous than someone else?
Sure.
Right? The government's never going to say, we don't want all of the information about you.
No, they're not going to
I
restrain
like
themselves.
it. I like where your head's at.
I don't know that would necessarily fix anything, or even if that's a particularly good idea, but we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And as always, question and comment for us below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.